All right, I got a request to talk about the inventory system I made, so I'm going to do that. When you hit tab, I spawn this backpack that is your inventory, and if you talk to this invisible person here, you get items, and those items go into your inventory like this, and you can drag them, you can click and drag and move them around, and they all bump around, and that's pretty cool. So we're going to talk about how I made this. If we first look at the 3D models, I have two models here. I have an open backpack, which I modeled and then used the texture paint to paint the texture on there. What is that? Was a guy holding a fish. Ignore that. So I painted the texture of a backpack on here, and then you save it after UV unwrapping it. And then I also made a closed backpack. So if we go back to the game, when you open it, I guess you don't see it open, but you see it close. So I swap out the models there. That's how it works there. So let's look at the code. If I pull up the code here, I have my user interface manager, which just manages like the menus and the HUD and stuff. So I have this backpack inventory scene. You can see it's a pack scene. So I load the scene when the game starts, or when this control starts. Then I have a boolean for is paused, and I have a reference to the backpack inventory. Ignore the sticker menu, that doesn't matter. When I press the pause menu, I'm going to pause the game. And then if it is paused, then don't process. For the pause game, what I do is I show the menu and I instantiate this backpack inventory. So I spawn this and then I add it to the scene, or I add it to the UI manager scene. And then when I unpause, I despawn the backpack inventory. So if we look at that, when I press menu, it spawns the scene, and you can see that animation plays as soon as it spawns, and then it goes away and then despawns. So I think that's what that despawn calls. It calls a function that plays the animation. So let's look at this backpack inventory. This is the backpack inventory scene. We can actually look at the scene tree here. You can see the cameras here. It's been a while since I've looked at this. I'm not sure where this big... Oh yeah, I have a dark background so that when you pause it, you see the background gets a little dark. That's what this big dark background is. But I have the root, which is just another node. I think everything's inside of it. I have this animation player that I made, which plays the backpack spawn automatically. That's what this button here does. As soon as this spawns, it'll play this animation. So let's look at that. So you can see it pops in a frame and it makes the background dark. And then we have this despawn animation that pulls it away. And I think it swaps the visibility right here. It swaps the visibility. So you'll see, if we do this, you'll see it's the open bag, and then we come back here, and as soon as this starts, it hides the open bag and shows the closed bag, and then it moves it around. I don't know what this raycast is doing. I think this is the raycast that I use to see where the mouse is pointing. So that's interesting. And I also have a spotlight to give us some light in case you're in a dark area. Okay, so the black background, everything makes sense. Sticker memory, ignore that. That's the sticker system. Item catcher, this is an area 3D, which I believe follows the mouse around. We're gonna find out in a second though. Is this top level? No. Okay. All right, so this is the script. Item 3D scene. I have this generic item 3D, which I will show you right now. This is the generic item 3D. we have this smoothie as the item. It's a rigid body, so it has physics. It has this sprite that's using a billboard texture so that it always faces the camera. It has a collision shape so that we can touch it with our Area 3D and our raycasts. And it has an item name, which pops up when you click on it. And it has a script. So let's look at the script. It has the sprite, has the item name label. It has a inventory item, which I believe is a resource, which I'll get into later. So when I create it, I say setup from item. I give it this item resource. We load the texture and we set the texture. I set the text and I give it some padding. I think the padding is so that it shows up on top of the sprite instead of in the middle. Let's double check. So if I grab one of these, it shows above the sprite, so it's not like overlapping with the actual texture. Yeah, and then when you click on it, you enable the label or disable the label. That's a tongue twister. So that's our inventory item 3D. Now we go back to the backpack. This is what we load. So we preload it. It loads as soon as this spawns. So we now have access to this pack scene. We have our spotlight, the backpack route. All these things are just, various things in our node tree. You can see they're green here, so they're inside of our node tree. So we can just access them for doing different things. We have the camera. I have a variable for storing the grabbed item, so we know what item I'm currently grabbing. And this replace time, I'm not sure. Oh, I think this is when if you drop the item outside, it will despawn the item and then spawn it back in as it's doing right there. Well, it looks like it respawned all of them, so it might be a bug. Right, so when we set up our backpack, which remember, we have our user interface, you press escape, it shows this backpack inventory menu. So this gets spawned when you hit escape to show the menu. So we spawn this, we connect the item catcher, body entered. Remember, item catcher is a Area 3D, so now we can keep track of what's inside of the Area 3D. We get our camera. If we have the camera, then we move the backpack route to be in front of the camera. Now this is interesting. If you look right here, while I'm moving, I spawn it, but since I'm moving, the camera is also moving, so I spawn it in front of the camera, but then we move. And so now it's no longer in front of the camera. So that's a current bug. Am I going to fix it? Who knows? But it spawns in front of the camera. That's what the code is doing. And I also moved the spotlight to be in front of the camera too. And if we fail to find a camera, then we push a warning. Then somewhere in here, I think it's in the animation, I call spawn items right here. You can call functions in the animation. I call spawn items, which takes the inventory of everything the player has from this player manager. This is a global singleton, which keeps track of all your player inventory. And we spawn each item as an item 3D. So this rigid body thing, we're just going to spawn a bunch of these. We add it. We have to call deferred because this is happening while the nodes are still spawning, sort of. So calling deferred makes it safe. I had a little bit of delay. You can wait for the timer to go off to delay it a little bit. And then if that item successfully spawned, then we say, all right, let's set up from the item resource, which is an inventory item resource, which we're about to go over. And then I spawn it, I set it at the spawn item position, which is, I believe, spawn item position. It's like right above the backpack, right there. All right, and then on despawn, we despawn all of the inventory item 3Ds, and we play the despawn backpack animation. Now, in the backpack inventory, while it's here, for every input, right? This is like getting the mouse or like keyboards. We're gonna look at the mouse screen position using this special function called get mouse position on the screen. We do a little bit of math. we have to project array from the origin. So you project array from the camera to the mouse screen position, which is really hard to explain, but just follow along, I guess. Our mouse raycast, we're going to set it to the mouse screen origin position, and then we're going to have it go from the screen, from the camera, forwards into the backpack. So when I open this, we're doing a raycast from the camera straight into the backpack. And that's what that code is doing there. Okay, when you hit left click, I force the raycast to update so we can, force the raycast to check what it's hitting. Then if it's colliding, if it's an item, then I set our grabbed item, enable the label. Very cool. And then in physics process, we're going to drag that item around as the mouse moves. When you release left click, we also drop the item, disable the label, set this item to null, because this is just our pointer to that item. So down here in physics process, this runs every physical frame. So every physics frame, should be around like 30 frames per second. If you're pressing left click, then we get our mouse screen position, and then we calculate the desired world space that we want our item to go into. And so we do this math here where we do the world space is the mouse screen position plus the camera's project ray normal mouse screen position. And then I set it to be 25 or 0.25 meters, which I think is just saying, I think what this is saying is set the item to be 0.25 meters directly in front of the camera at that mouse position. So as you move the mouse, that item is going to be 0.25 meters in front of that. This is a long code line. Next, we're setting the linear velocity of the grabbed item. And this part's cool, because if you don't have this, then it gets weird. So you set the linear velocity to be in the direction from the item to the desired world space. And then I multiply it by 20 just to give it, the right number of force, the right velocity. And then you also multiply it, and this is the coolest part, you multiply it by the distance to the world space. So as you get closer to your desired position, it's going to slow down. So if it's far away, it's going to move really fast to the mouse position. But if it's really close to the mouse position, it's not going to move at all. It'll slow down. It'll, decrease its velocity as it gets closer, which I can show you again here. So if I drag it really quick, you see it like sort of delays a little bit. But as it gets close, it stops. Pretty cool. That lets it, the velocity calculations lets it like bounce into the walls here of the backpack. That's kind of what's going on. Okay, so, sorry. When the bodies enter our area 3D, which is currently at our mouse position, we have an area 3D that's following our mouse. Actually, I think I can show you with visible collision shapes. That might make it make a little bit more sense. Let me do this. Scan sit. I will run this level here. Oh, we don't have a player. My bad. Here we go. I won't run it from that level. So if we come here and we talk to the invisible item giver, they will give us our items. We open the inventory, and you can see this red square here is actually the raycast coming from the camera. It just looks weird because you're looking straight at the raycast, at the base of the raycast. But there should be an area, or actually, is there an area at the bottom, or are we just doing the raycast? I might have misspoken there. But you can see the physical collision shape of this item 3D as it's rolling about. Yeah. So I think it's it might just be the item. Let's see what calls this. On body enter, this is called up here. It's connected by the item catcher, And our item catcher is an area 3D. Oh, I think the item catcher is actually this big area 3D down here, right? Let's see. Yeah. So you'll see this big box on the ground. What the item catcher is actually doing is it's catching the items as they fall out of the backpack. I'm sorry, I misspoke a little bit earlier. Hopefully that's not too confusing. So when an item falls out of the backpack, this function is called. If we control click on it, we can see that if the body is inventory item 3D, then we're going to wait for 30 seconds, our replace time, and then we're going to move the body back to the right position up top. And we'll set the linear velocity to 0. Okay, so that is the backpack inventory code, which comes from the user interface manager, which is just the UI. We know our inventory item 3Ds. This is the 3D rigid body that we spawn and then we populate with the items from this resource. So the last thing to look at is this resource here called inventory item, which is just a resource. It's called inventory item. It has a texture, an item name, an item description, and a physical rigid body pack scene. Let's look at what those look like. So if I get rid of this, here we can see that we have our inventory items. I keep them all in one folder so I can dynamically spawn them. And if we look at the Doughboy, which is just a fried piece of dough, we have our texture here, we have a name, we have a description, and this physical RB doesn't look like it's being used anywhere, so maybe ignore that. Let's do this. Control Shift F, and we can find everywhere that this is referenced in the code. Yeah, so it's not even being used. I'm going to comment that out. I don't remember what I was doing with that. But yeah, so you can see that we can save these resources with unique values for every item, right? So, different names, different descriptions. I have a whole bunch of them. Eventually they'll have like, this Slurpee gives you X amount of health, and then you can have other items that give you more health or like stat boosts. You can see we have all of our textures here. They're all nice and crunchy pixels. So that is very cool. Okay, the last thing we got to look at is the item giver. How do we get these items? So when you talk to the invisible item giver that we've been talking to, they will give you items. Oh yeah, okay. Let's look at that actual item giver. If we go to Gansett 3D, this is our item giver. They're invisible. But you can see that they have these item giver nodes as a child of this area 3D. So the area 3D allows us to interact with it with our interact raycast. When you press F, there's that raycast that's pointing forwards from the camera, from the player. You can barely see it. It's this big blue line that's in front of the player. You'll see it turn red when I'm pointing at the item giver. That means that raycast is colliding. So when I press F, I hit that area 3D, and then that triggers the item giver giving us items. So we look at the script. When I say on signal event, oh, this is coming from the dialogue. But yeah, you can do this any way you want. Pretty much, I'm not sure what this is doing. Pretty much all you need to do is, this code is just a child of our item giver, right? So we have a coffee milk giver. I say, give me 1 coffee milk. I have a crunchy leaf giver. We could say, give me 5 or 6 crunchy leaves. And so what happens is when we call this give item function, it's going to add that many number of items to the player inventory. So if we save this, and I think we have to restart the game. I'm going to turn off debug shapes too. it's going to give us a ton of leaves. Yeah, here we go. So we got a bunch of leaves now. And that's how the item giver works. I made it just like a small component that you can add to anyone. And then whenever you need to, you just call give items, and it will give you the items to the player inventory. And if you want to see this, we'll go over it real quick. The player manager is a singleton. It's auto-loaded. It's a global auto-load for managing the player. And we just have an array of these inventory items. And then when I say add inventory item, you just add it to the array. So yeah, that's the code. And that is how I made the inventory system. So it's pretty cool. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this made sense. Feel free to go through the video and pause it and just see how it all works. And, try things out. The way I did it might not be the best way, so, try it out yourself. And have fun playing with these physical items. You can do a lot with them. We have a backpack here, but I was thinking maybe if you have like a cooking game, you could have like a stove with like a frying pan or like a pot and put the food in the pot. Maybe like chop up some food. I don't know. The world's your oyster, man. But anyways, thanks for watching. Tune in next time.